We have just had a wonderful day, and I can tell you that we are in for another treat this evening. Indianapolis has done so much. We don't get the credit always from around the country, but Indianapolis is definitely on the map. It is definitely a city that is on the move, and so we have to be about the business of making sure that we are at the table and that our issues are being addressed. So this evening, we want to do more than just talk. It's good to come and have a conversation, but if it goes no further than that, that's all it was, is just a walk in the park. And so we want to do more than just talk. And so those, the meetings that we had earlier today are all about that.
So again, thank you guys for being here. I am not going to delay and tell you about all the great things of my life. I'm going to let you get to the program, and I'd like to take this time to introduce our Master of Ceremony, Mr. Mark Mullins.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening, everybody. Good evening. Yeah, and welcome to the 2018-2019 Steward Speaker Series 32nd annual lecture series season. 32 years we've been doing this and meeting here like this. This year's theme is the Year of the Woman. And so guys out there, let's put our hands together for our strong women this year. You know, this is an exciting time for the Steward Speaker Series, celebrating 32 years of impact and charts the course for many more years of service down the line to the Indianapolis community. This event means so much to the community because it gets a discussion going that we all need to be having. It gives us a chance to ask questions that probably others of us in the audience have. It gives us a chance to share ideas and then take what we learn here today and take it back to our neighborhoods, to our blocks, to our schools, to our community, to educate and to foster that dialogue to continue moving. I'm thankful to Matt and to the Steward Speakers Board of Directors, who we just applauded, the leadership team, for allowing me to be here tonight. We're excited to welcome all our prestigious panelists who have taken time out of their day and their lives to be here with us to hold this very important conversation tonight. The State of Black Affairs Indianapolis edition. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the podium Dr. Nasser Peydar, Chancellor of IUPUI, to the stage to offer remarks tonight.
Thank you very much, and good evening. We had practiced this before. You could do better than this. Good evening. Good evening. Well, we are proud. IUPUI is proud to be title sponsor for the Steward Speaker Series. For more than 32 years, as long as I've been at IUPUI, the series has brought over 100 leaders, community advocates, and other public figures to Indianapolis to speak about the power of human potential. This would not have been possible without Matt's great work. Let's hear it again for Matt. The State of Black America is a profound conversation that IUPUI is proud to be part of. But we at IUPUI have taken the initiative to go beyond conversation and implement policies and practices that reflect our commitment, particularly since we all know that higher education is a critical factor in determining the state of African American quality of life.
Now, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing tonight's moderator. Over the course of a journalistic career that has seen him interview multiple U.S. presidents to top athletes and entertainers in Hollywood, Roland S. Martin is a journalist who has always maintained a clear sense of his calling in this world. Martin is host and managing editor of Roland Martin Unfiltered, the first daily online show in history focused on news and analysis of politics, entertainment, sports, and culture from an explicitly African-American perspective.
How y'all doing? All right, I know somebody black in here asking me, did he walk out here with some orange shoes on? Y'all gotta understand, the world champion Houston Astros are in the American League Championship. Excuse me, I'm sorry y'all 1-5. Oh, too soon? Being from Houston? So of course, I'm a Houston native and our colors are blue and orange. So that's why I had to hit y'all with the Astro socks too. Oh yes, that's right. I'm coordinated. I represent my hometown. So Boston Red Sox, we're gonna beat y'all down, just letting y'all know. Just letting y'all know. Glad to see all of you here. Thank you so very much. A big shout out to the Steward Bros. Give it up for them, y'all. I think this is the third time they invited me, and they using the same damn picture. I do not look the same. I'm just messing with y'all. I'm messing with y'all. It's a joke. Lighten up, okay? We're gonna get to some serious stuff, but it's okay for y'all to laugh. It's all good. Where all the alphas at? All right, the rest of oh, 6. Now the rest of y'all who belong to a youth group, you don't get shout outs. So it's all good. Let's get right into it. We want to bring out our panel right now. First and foremost, you have already heard her, the Deltas, shout her out. I know my wife's a Delta. I know. I give y'all a shout out too. Fine, Deltas. Okay. All right, there you go. Only because of the wife. Fine. Longtime leader of Essence Magazine. She, of course, also National Cares Mentoring Movement. That's what I call it, the National Cares Mentoring Movement. She's the founder of that as well. She's the queen of Black America. And ain't no way in hell she is 70 plus years old. Black don't crack. At all. Give it up for Susan Taylor. Right there in the middle, right there in the middle, right there in the middle. You in the middle, you in the middle. I'm gonna give it up for Kefra, her husband. See, anytime a black man looking good, y'all always go, girl, your husband, oh, the wife, she can take care of him. Y'all, Susan looking so good because Kefra got it on lockdown. So I always give Kefra a shout out. Because you know, a brother look good, y'all don't give him no credit. It's always the wife. Woman look good, brother gets no credit. All right, next up, folks, you have seen him on television, on radio. He has more big-ass words than the dictionary. In his spare time, he actually goes to look for 12-letter words to use on television. And in truth, he's really a frustrated rapper. Put your hands together for Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Now you Usain Bolt. All right. Our next guest, our final panelist here, of course, you have known him for years, leader of the National Action Network. You've seen him talking Politics Nation on MSNBC. Many of you might recall back in the day when he was kicking it with James Brown. The man who at one time had his own line of velour tracksuits. Put your hands together, Reverend Al Sharpton. All right, let's get right into it. In 25 years, we will be a nation that's majority people of color. By 2043, 53% of America will be Latino, Black, Asian, Native American. 47% will be white Americans. From the Black perspective, Are we ready to assume that demographic power?
We're not ready, but we're getting ready. We have to believe that we are aware of all the places in which we're hurting, the places where we are weakened. And, you know, we were to open with little statements, and I'm not going to make a statement. What I want to do, Roland, and there's a video that I'm going to ask that we play. Because what really rests in my heart and hurts it every day is the number of our children and families who are living in poverty. And beyond our view, our middle class view, because we're mostly middle class here, there's the pain of poverty, living in shelters, going to schools without any of the supports that our children have, and so much more. Violence. I grew up in Harlem and never heard a gunshot when I was growing up. All of these things create trauma. And we expect children who are growing up in trauma to perform in ways that children who grow up in lovely suburbs with all the fine things that children should have, the supports that they need. We compare children who have none of those things to children who have those things in multiples. And so what I wanted to do was really look at the roots of black poverty and for us to understand who we are and why we're in the condition we're in.
Well, I think that really pivoting off of what Susan said is that it's first we've got to come into ourselves. If we have a minority complex and we become the majority, it'll be almost like in the Bible when Moses sent out Caleb and the crew to check out the promised land, and they came back saying, to us they appeared as giants,
Right.
and we as grasshoppers. We have been psyched into acting like minorities, even in cities where we're the majority, or where we are a substantial part of the population. For example, we are 2/3 black and Latino of the population in New York and only had one black mayor, and get none of the pension funds investments with our financial services people, allow people not to advertise in our media. So are we going to be ready will be gauged by are we ready now? That's why I think what Susan's doing that's so important with mentoring is Dyson and I was talking in the green room. One of the reasons that I was always considered bold is by growing up in the black church under some premier black preachers, because I started preaching as a little boy. I never knew white folks in charge, because I grew up where black folks signed the check. So I never got a paycheck from white folks till I was 55 at MSNBC. I never had a white boss, so that I didn't know my place. And I think that as a race, we will be ready when we didn't know our place. But at the same time, it was because I had a black mother who ended up raising me single mother after my father left, who gave me to black men. I was raised by Reverend William Jones, Reverend Jesse Jackson. So by me seeing these images, and then at 18 meeting James Brown, I never managed James Brown, I was like his son. And when the reason the mentoring program is so important to me is when James Brown said to me one day, I was visiting him in Augusta, he said, y'all out there marching, you've been marching all your life. He said, I can talk to the president. I said, well, you should go tell him we need Martin Luther King's holiday. He told the secretary, get the president on the phone. I said, yeah, right. So to my surprise, 5 hours later, the White House called back. And next thing I know, we're going to Washington to meet Ronald Reagan, 1982. Nobody knew who I was in my 20s. He on the plane, I rarely talk about this in public, but I'm sitting next to Susan Taylor and mentoring. On the plane going up there, he said, when we land, I want to go by Mr. Edwards' place. I said, whatever you say, Godfather. He said, I want you to do your hair like mine. I said, you want me to do what? And he said, I want you to do your hair like mine. I said, why? He said, because when we go to the White House tomorrow, when they see you, I want them to see me. You like my son. Well, nobody knew. The reason I did my hair and maintain it now is no man ever asked me to look like them. I didn't have a father. And it meant everything to me that I felt worthy that some man wanted me to be them. So what was a style to cartoonists was an affirmation to me. To hear was the biggest entertainer in the world wanted me, whose daddy had not come to see him in 20 years, wanted me to look like him. That's what we've got to put in our kids. We have to affirm them, and then we'll be ready.
Michael, we talk about, again, 2043. My greatest fear is that we will be like South Africa, where you will have numbers,
right,
but you won't have economic power.
That's right.
You might have political power. When you look at the fact that, depending upon what happens in less than 30 days,
that's right,
we may have, for the first time, 50 plus members of the Congressional Black Caucus. That might result in a black Speaker of the House.
Right.
You look at you might have 3 black governors elected in 1 year when you haven't had 3 black governors elected since Reconstruction in all of those years. That still is my fear, that we'll have those numbers combined with Latinos and Asians, but won't be able to have the economic power. And if you want to understand America, you got to understand the money.
Absolutely. Well, it's just great to be here. The brothers Stewards, brothers Stewart, they've been phenomenal. To sit here with 2 American icons, Susan Taylor still looking gorgeous and brilliant and amazing, right? As Roland and as Reverend Sharpton said, the queen of Black America, because for many of us who grew up, she was the iconic representation of black women. Before there was Black Women Magic, there was Susan Taylor and Essence Magazine, right? And Reverend Sharpton, I mean, we sit in the green room. This is a man who's preaching at 6 years old with Mahalia Jackson, right? Mahalia Jackson, Adam Clayton Powell, right, mentored him before he met then Martin Luther King Jr., and then mentored by Reverend Jesse Jackson. This ain't no sprinter. This is a long distance runner right here, right? And I mean, listen to his story of follicular fidelity, right? And
how many letters is that? How many letters is that word?
I'm gonna get to you in a minute. Hold on.
Go ahead.
So and to show, right, that people dismissing them. That's why I say put a silhouette of Al Sharpton next to George Washington and tell me the difference. Right? He had presidential potential in his silhouette from the time he began using his hair that way, not just James Brown. And then this guy right here, I call him the Black Ryan Seacrest. Right? He knows every darn thing about media. He is on top of the digital game like you will not believe. He is on top of the terrestrial game. He can do television, he can do radio, and he is an intellect of the first order, and this man should have his own show right now. There's no doubt about that. There's just no doubt about that. You're absolutely right, Roland. I went to Guyana 15, 20 years ago to negotiate a truce of sorts between the Afro-Guyanese and the Indo-Guyanese, because the Afro-Guyanese had the political power, but the Indo-Guyanese had the dough. Then, now, Indo-Guyanese power and purse string. And so your point about apartheid is right here. The irony is that black genius, black sweat, black insight has made America what it is today, right? Can you imagine America without black people? Ralph Ellison said, what would America be without the Negro? Without LeBron James, without Victor Oladipo, if we're gonna get local, right? Right? What would it be without James Brown, Susan Taylor, Al Sharpton, Roland Martin? What would it be without Jesse Jackson. Even what would it be without Kanye? Right? A lot saner. But what's interesting is that, but even Kanye, early Kanye, 5 albums, some of the greatest music you've heard in American history, some of the most powerful assertions of black intelligence. We need to make Kanye sit down to listen to Kanye. Right? I'm not jumping on, and I'm going to answer your question, I'm not going to jump on his choice of wife. The Kardashian girls have tried to save more Negroes than the NAACP. But here's my point. That the point...
And they destroyed more Negroes than more of the Republican National Convention.
Ain't no doubt about that. Well, the jury's out on half of them. But what's interesting, but let me answer your question. So there is no question that our black genius has undergirded American capital. Not just American expressive culture, not just American empire, but the very existence of America rests upon black ingenuity. The plans for Washington, D.C., the blueprints that were laid, the labor that was put forth. So yes, the real tragedy will be, as Ms. Taylor said, getting ready, and as Reverend Al Sharpton said, understanding our position. We have, in one sense, marginalized ourselves. First of all, we've not taken advantage of helping each other, right? We still think the white man's water is wetter. We still think if a black person mess up one time, I ain't gonna deal with them niggas no more, right? You go to a white man that hurts you, another white man that hurts you less, another white man that hurts you a little less, a white woman that hurts you a lot, a white woman that hurts you, you just keep on using white folk because whiteness is the default position of your psychological deference to a culture that is alien from you. Now, I'll end by saying this. So demographically, we will be, right, in terms of collectively with Latinos who have outstripped us in terms of minority status. And the black-brown tension has to be recognized, but the black-brown coalition has to be realized. And in that sense, right, let's not lie. A lot of Mexicans come over here with the notion that we are at the bottom of the totem pole. And the first thing you do to become an American to cement your status is not learn the Constitution, but learn how to dog black people. So we know that there are some racist elements in Mexico, but we also know we bought hook, line, and sinker some of the xenophobic passions of America that tells us it's the Mexican that is the problem. It's not the Mexican, it's not the Puerto Rican, it's not the Dominican, it's not the Cuban, it's the right-wing Republican that is killing us together. So what you and I have to do, very quickly, we have to recognize that demographically with that shift, we got to help each other. We got to generate consensus among ourselves. We all ain't got to agree, but let's turn to each other and help each other and build each other's business. What did Jay-Z say? I'll be damned if I'll take some Cristal as long as Puff has what? Ciroc. So if Puff has Ciroc, buy Ciroc. If Roland Martin has Unfiltered, subscribe to and support Unfiltered. That's what we got to do. And when we do that, we generate enough infrastructure to support the genius we already have. If America loses black people, it loses its soul. But in the meantime, black people have to regain ourselves. And I'll end by saying this. We got a white boy in office right now that shows you anything can be done by anybody. Right? This man is unmolested by enlightenment, untrammeled by insight, a sexual predator, a pimp of the first order, and he's still president of the United States of America. Anything is possible, and we got to seize the day.
We don't know, we don't have an understanding of all the barriers that have been put before us to prevent us from what? From thriving. At every turn, there's been a backlash. So we are the most highly educated, the most affluent black people on this planet. We are so fortunate. What we don't have, we have everything except each other, except one another, except, you know, what we're talking about tonight. We have to come together, not just to hear brilliant speakers, and I'm flanked by brilliance. We have to come together like this regularly to lift up our history and our culture, for our children to understand who they are. Because when black boys know who they are, they're going to pull up their pants and run the world. And that's people's fear. But without our history, without knowing our history and what happened to us, right? We believe those images that our young people are bombarded with, that we are thugs, You know, that we don't do anything right. As Michael was saying, that white people's everything is better than ours. I believe that we have to push from the congregation to the pulpit, that our sanctuaries need to be open, not just for worship service. I mean, we can praise God at home. And sometimes we're in there praising God and we're raising $50,000 for pastor's 50th anniversary. But the children around the corner don't have books. So I'm saying it's a moment. This has got to be a time, Roland, if we're going to be ready 20 years from now, we have to awaken. It's a moment of awakening, not just conversation, but having a plan and coming together with our egos behind us. And really, if Roland, what do you need to have a show? What must we do? What must we do for you to have a show? Well, you know what we have sent a message to all the entities in this nation. You can treat black folk any way you want. You can over-incarcerate our children. You can remove shows from some of the most talented people of our race on television and fill that same slot with mediocrity and lower ratings. This is our fault, not theirs. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. I'm looking in the mirror. Tell us what we must do.
One, you can challenge mainstream media to say, okay, who are the folks that if it's about talent, if it's about work ethic, it's about relationships, then that's one conversation. So that's mainstream, okay? And so then now you talk about black media. We've got to be willing to tell black media, don't only feed us comedy shows and award shows. If you want us to keep watching, you've got to give us something else. The fact that there's not a single black network that has even a 1-hour show out of 172 hours in a week, but that says that you can't even do 1 hour, that's a problem. Because at least we could go to black media and say we got a voice. Black newspapers got us through, black radio got us through. And the third piece now is on the digital side. White media in newspaper looked the same when radio and television came on. Now, digital is looking the same. We now should be saying to Facebook, to Twitter, to YouTube, we're over-indexing on all of your platforms. We're actually making you rich. Where's the black content that you're funding? Because they're funding content. They're not funding black content. It's non-existent. And I've talked to them. And I've created the digital platform that nobody can say it's not quality. They can't say that. So I'm gonna take away all of your excuses. But then the last part also has to be, we've got to fund our freedom. We've got to be willing to say, yes, I'm gonna support you with $50. Because your cable bill, you're paying $200 a month and you're not being fed, but you say you wanna be fed. So those things actually have to happen. And so I'm not begging mainstream media for a show. I created the digital show because I said, one, by creating it and controlling it, I then can determine if I want to tomorrow have a 1-hour sit down with one of you, we can do that, or we can do something different, or we can go live. But that's also why I did that. Reverend Sharpton, go ahead.
No, I think that we need a combination of all of that. You remember in the late 90s, there was what was called the Katz Memo.
Yep.
And a person from a radio station came to me and gave me at National Action Network the Katz Memo. The Katz Memo was a media group called Katz Media that would advise the top advertisers on how to buy their advertising. And they said, don't project a lot on black-owned media. You want prospects, not suspects.
It's called an urban dictate.
Urban dictate. They brought it to me. I called a march, because National Action Network meets even now every Saturday morning, which I got from Breadbasket. I don't care where I am, I'm home Saturday morning, so I don't have to gear up troops. We meet every Saturday. And we went down, marched on Madison Avenue, started meeting with advertisers, which is what he's saying, and told them not only will we stop buying your product, we elected members of the city council that said we will not zone you in the city. So you got politics correlated with those of us that can mobilize in the streets. That has to mobilize also with supporting platforms of black-owned. That's how we got them to come in, Pepsi, to advertise in Essence and Ebony and others. 99 from the Madison Avenue Initiative. We don't do that anymore. Now when we go for it, they say, oh, Rev Allen and them shaking folk down. No, they shaking us down. They're taking our money, advertising on white media, and then we wonder why all we see is black women tearing each other's wigs off or whatever you call it, and not having intelligent shows. And then when one or two break through, like a Tamarind they put off, if I get a show, why Rev Mal on TV? Well, I was trained by Jesse Jackson, who had a show on CNN for 10 years, if you knew your history. We're continuing stuff. And we've got to, again, as she said, know who we are.
Right.
This is a continuation, not the beginning. But if they change and don't tell us our story, and we think we recreated every generation, so we get to Ferguson because the family called us, and they done tricked some young folk into saying, I ain't Grandma's movement. No, Grandma took us from the back of the bus. You just broke a window.
Right.
You don't know what Grandma's movement was. We've got to be the continuation of a long chain of great folk rather than think we got to undo something and not be what we have become.
When you don't see yourself present, first of all, we could change all of this, Roland, by writing letters. If one congregation got together and decided, oh, you know what? This is where we're spending our dollars. You're not advertising on a show that matters to us, your show, or your show. It would change immediately because it's all about the money. It's not about anything else. It's about that bottom line, and they want to sell that product. And if you said you're not going to buy it and enough people said that, it would shift. But we have to organize that. And very often we have faith institutions that are afraid of that because that money is coming in from wherever, building the things that we do need in our community. And you said it, say it again. Who's going to support this regeneration, the rebuilding of our community? Nobody's going to do that for us. There's a long history. You know, the demonization of black men, daddies who leave. Let that video stay in your heart. There is no person, man or woman, who cares about, there's no parent who doesn't care about a child. But a system has really turned black men against themselves, and there's never been a positive plan for a man. We didn't tell the whole story, but there was a time when you could not get welfare if a man was in the house. Black men have never made incomes that were commensurate with white men's incomes. So sisters always had to work, right? So daddy, now, here comes the welfare lady. So what does daddy do? Daddy has to scoop. All of his stuff has to be removed. He goes on and starts another family. He's already broken from what you saw, from being beaten and overworked and called a boy and out of his name and hated. So we have to understand, understanding is the most important word. What is his story? If daddy is gone, what is his story? Why did he go? Why did he start another family? He didn't just come to life like that. Circumstances have really impacted on us in ways that we will never know until we start coming together and having these dialogues and telling our history.
So I want to bring up this. I believe you go back to basics. I know some people say, oh, that's old school. Yeah, but it's amazing how a lot of old school stuff works. So this year we lost Dorothy Cotton. Dorothy Cotton was the highest ranking woman in Southern Christian Leadership Conference. I had the opportunity, I think probably, I had the last sit-down interview with her in February. She died in May. A lot of people don't realize she was over the Citizenship Education Program for SCLC. And most people think about that because they think about only in voter empowerment, but that was not their sole job. In her book, and she talked about it with me as well, when you were coming to, you couldn't just say, I'm going to be in SCLC and you go to a march. You had to go through her program first. That's right. But beyond the voting piece, she said what they did was everybody would come in, they would assess all of them mentally to see and hear all of the stuff you just talked about. Then they would empty that out of them, put new stuff into them, then send them through SCLC. Right. So if we're talking about how do we move forward, where do we go, how do we start, I do believe a huge part of this has to be a reprogramming of Black America.
So think about what we're dealing with here. And plus, you ain't got access. You can't hit Brian Williams up, but you hitting Roland Martin up because he's accessible to his people. Let me tell you something, and I'm so glad Roland raised this because I have this problem everywhere I go. And I tell black people, you know, I was sitting on a panel. It was a two-man panel, me and Taylor Branch, when I was at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. You know his 3-volume story of America through Martin Luther King Jr., my 2 books on King. And somebody came at, because I was saying backstage, black people are the only people in the world complain and kvetch and bellyache about talking and about panels and what we gonna do besides that. Like that ain't something serious, because if you had more of them and more intelligence to transmit knowledge, if you went to school more, if you studied your people more, if you look at what white folk are doing, which are using panels to create paradigms to block your black ass out, right? This is what they use their intellectuals. We excuse ours. We don't need all that highfalutin. Negro, you do. And let me tell you, Taylor Branch said, oh, but excuse me, Martin Luther King Jr. spent the lion's share of his time doing what we're doing right here. You remember him? No, we're going to move ahead now. We've got to strategize about overcoming. Can we get, he talked, he thought. He had a PhD for a reason, not to show off, but to have the critical tools of analysis available to him to engage in reasoned defense of vulnerable populations. When I got young black folk come up to me, why you be using all them big words? I said, to keep white folk from giving you big sentences. Right? And so, I, for one, am tired of black people apologizing for engaging in the very thing that Miss Taylor spoke about and Reverend Sharpton spoke about. How you gonna know if you ain't taught? How are you gonna know your history? They're not gonna teach it to you in the major white schools. It's antithetical to their own survival. My school, Georgetown, is just now reckoning with 272 enslaved black people. They weren't slaves, they were enslaved. They were enslaved. They made money off of them. When the university was in a pinch, they sold those 272 people, and Georgetown was able to succeed. Now we're now
Georgetown able to survive.
Survive, succeed, and prosper.
Yes.
Right? Based upon the selling of black flesh. We do not know our story. If we go back and understand what Ms. Taylor presented on this screen here, that Kefra Burns brilliantly articulated, the pathologization of black people, the demonization of dark skin, the stigma of our African identity, if we could, as Roland said, program ourselves by unlearning all of the madness and the mental disease that has been transmitted to us. So I'm tired of black people saying, what we gonna do besides go to a panel? Negro, go to a panel, learn something, talk about it, learn what books we talk about, what essays we're referring to, because I tell you what, I write books like niggas write hooks. And yes, I'm telling you, if a rapper can stand on stage and recite verbatim something he never wrote down, a piece of literature, God forgive me for my brash delivery, but I remember vividly what these streets did to me. Imagine me allowing you to nitpick at me, portray me like a pick-a-knee. Jay-Z said, no, my teachers couldn't reach me and my mama couldn't beat me hard enough to match the pain of my pop not seeing me. So, look at that iambic pentameter. Look at that cultural convention. Look at that enjambment. Look at that prosody. Look at that internal rhyme. Look at that external rhyme. If you would respect the intelligence of a Roland Martin, he got a real show with real people, with real intelligence, with real news that would make something different to us, we could change this world. So what we have to do is respect us enough. I'm going to tell you, and I'll end here. I make money from white folks so I can share it with Negroes. I ain't lying to you. I'm a one-man United Negro College Fund. You understand? Because, and look, I still work with the white man. People say, how come you don't teach at Howard? They ain't invited me. And the white man pay on time. Stop. I'm not with you, right? I'm trying to live my best life. I ain't going back and forth with you. So, but because black institutions are underfunded, starved, systematically denied, I give to them at lower cost what I take from the white man at the top dollar. And so now when I see Negroes, what you gonna do besides read a book, besides writing a book? Nigga, write one yourself. And then when you learn to write a book and a sentence, when I write books, everything I do is extra. Everything I do is because of God's grace. Everything I do is because I'm in love with black people. I got a love affair with black people that can never be broken. I am in love with you. I love you so much I work myself to death because I believe that our ability to survive must be told to our people. That's what I do.
Part of the programming is that not only don't a brother see your show is real, we get angry at those that stand up for us. So they will shoot somebody, family will call me, and black folks will say, what he coming to town for? Half my time, I got to fight with Negroes on why I'm fighting for them. So, and then you have a Dyson having to deal with why he write a book, or you why you do what you do. If we would just get out each other's way, but we don't even understand we are programmed to fight each other. Who do you think you are? Mm-hmm. And if we would really stop and look at that, one of the things you talked about how we had to go through training in the movement. One of the things I was told is you are not going to ever get credit till you're gone. Dr. King, people don't realize it. Dr. King never knew how much he was honored. Never saw Martin Luther King Street. He was at a low level in the polls among blacks when he got killed. His last march, when he went to Memphis.
Low 30%.
That's right. When he went to Memphis to help the strikers, yep, young blacks started a riot at his march. He came back to Memphis to prove he could have a nonviolent march, and that's when they killed him. We've been taught to fight those that stand out. And that's how deep the programming is. So you're absolutely right. We've got to deal with the deprogramming because we've been taught, they will say, guy asked me today, well, what do you do? I landed at the Indianapolis airport. And brother got off the plane and said, Mel, I couldn't talk to you sitting in first class. I said, well, I don't ride the back of nothing in honor of Rosa Parks. I'm always in first class. And he said to me, yeah, well, I know you come out here to raise some hell and get in the paper. I said, first of all, I don't need to go nowhere to get, I got my own show. I can stay home and be on TV, but it's the psyche that we have, that if somebody white come to town, we're honored if they come to fight, but if we come, we're under suspicion. White men tell a lie is believable, black men tell the truth is questionable. That's how we live. And we've got to stop that, and we've got to stop those that do benefit from the fighting. Have got to acknowledge that. I told this, and I'll end there. I told this at Dyson's church, and Reverends, he does go to church. He go to Alfred Street Baptist Church. A black corporate conservative executive said to me, Reverend Al, I don't believe in all that marching and protesting you do. I know y'all got some laws changed, racial profiling, style of first, but I don't believe in that. Look at my resume. I got where I got because of where I went to school and the connections I got. Civil rights didn't write my resume. Read my resume. And I looked at it and I said, yes, very impressive. And you're right. Civil rights didn't write your resume. But civil rights made somebody read your resume. You're not the first qualified Negroes in America. Don't ever forget when you come downtown in Indianapolis tomorrow to work or go wherever you go, there was some unleaded, undegreed grandmas that laid down in the gutter and went to jail to sponsor you. That's what we need to program.
As Chuck D, I just interviewed him last week in Los Angeles, and what he says is that the last piece of real estate that cannot be sold is in between your ears. And so, understanding that, let's say we go through reprogramming. Let's say within families, let's say within our freedom schools, let's say within churches, we begin to do that. I do think if we look at the three most fundamental things that speak to our issues in America, Maynard Jackson articulated those, which came from his grandfather. The 3 B's: the ballot, the book, and the buck. So I want to deal with the book first. Then I'm going to deal with the ballot second, and then I'm going to deal with the buck third. In terms of the book, it's interesting to me when we have this battle going on right now with public education. I have a lot of folks who they say, Roland, why do you support charter schools? I said, I support anything that works. What I mean by that is charter, public, online, traditional, magnet, homeschool, online school. I don't care technical school. I don't care what it is, as long as it works. How do we return to this mentality where there is nothing that will get in the way of your little behind getting an education? If you read James D. Anderson's book, The Education of Blacks in the South, 1860 to 1935, after slavery, 92% of all black kids in Memphis were in school, 41% of white kids in D.C. You had this fervor, this undeniable fervor. You can meet black people who raised kids in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. They had 15 kids and all went to college. And they never made more than $8,000 a year. So how do you, the three of you, from your vantage point, get back to that point where education is flat out the most critical thing that we do for our kids between the moment they're born and when they're 18?
We know that education is the key. And that's the reason why there is no city, no hamlet, no rural area where there are poor black people where the educational system works. Nowhere. That's the huge barrier. And it's purposeful. And we know it and we allow it. So I'm not looking at them. I'm looking in the mirror, I'm looking at myself, and I'm looking at you. As long as education is funded by property taxes also, and you don't own any property and you be poor, how are the schools going to be funded? So you see all the goods and the riches going to suburban schools, our children having nothing. I'm working on the south side of Chicago. We're in 58 cities. And we think that Indianapolis Cares is going to start again here. 2 sisters have stepped up, and I hope it's going to happen. You know, anybody who's interested in really working with us, we're working in the schools. We're working in a school. We've been in there in Chicago. Michael's been there twice. 5 years. And I've seen both principals lose $3 million in a school that is grossly underfunded over 5 years. The community has done nothing about it. They probably don't even know it. I don't think it's being spoken about from any pulpit. We have to awaken. This is what we should be speaking about in church. The Holy Spirit doesn't need you to go to church and praise His holy name. You could do that at home. What we have to do is awaken and preach, yes, and give us the word, yes. But what's the plan? Give us the plan and the word. And let us work together to say, okay, that school, if you don't, we can take anybody to task if we do this, if we come together. Roland, this is the last thing I'm going to say. It's understanding. We have to understand that for 250 years, enslaved and post-slavery, we've been taught to hate ourselves. We've been taught to hate our hair, our hips, our lips, our color, everything about ourselves. I'm 72. The worst thing that you could have said to a black kid when we were growing up was, you'd be African. African? We hated our motherland. So it's going to take time. That book that came up at the end of the video, it's called The New Way Forward, Healing What's Hurting Black America. That's what we're teaching in schools, creating pilots so that we can replicate it. Not going through that system. The system is never going to allow us to tell our story, ever. We can override that. There's not a sanctuary in any of our communities across the country that is not empty all day long in the middle of the day. On Saturdays, what are we doing? While the Jewish kids doing their little thing and learning their history and culture, and the Chinese and the Koreans and the Asians, the Greeks, we're out there doing whatever. We need to come into those sanctuaries.
So you said there's a plan, so we asked the plan.
What's that?
If you asked specifically in terms of that plan, Mary Wright Edelman, the Children's Defense Fund, they have a literal toolkit for freedom schools.
You know, every congregation is full of teachers and historians and successful people. Come together and let's tell our story. Make sure our children know who they are. That's really it. And we have to learn how to love ourselves. We have to learn to disrespect and disregard black-skinned women is to disrespect yourself, your ancestral mother. We have to hold up a pure African, the blackest of black person, and say, woo, admire it. We've been taught to hate that, so we have to really be honest with ourselves. There's a whole peeling off of all this stuff, as you've been saying, that's been put on us over the centuries. And there's a process that we have to use to come back to our humanity and to who we are.
I went to all traditional schools. I ain't never been to a private school in my life, but I went to a magnet school. I was in school of communications. And the reason when I went live, I set all the equipment up myself because I was taught that in the magnet school. And I was trying to get him to understand that. I said, brother, if when Steve Perry, you talk about his school that he's doing with Diddy in Harlem, he controls the curriculum. He controls who gets the contracts, and he controls the education. I said, so I'm not opposed to any traditional school, but if there are traditional schools that are failing our kids, I cannot support failure.
And we've got to talk about education in the way they won't shoot it down before we get started. You have got to have control of education in your community. In 1968, I was getting ready to go to high school. From junior high school to high school, we couldn't go a month because the fight was over community control of education. That was my year going to high school as a freshman. When we lost control of the public schools, you had to experiment in whatever works. If it's charter, if it's magnet, we first got to put an educational climate back into our community, where we put in our children the need and the thirst for education. My mother dropped out of school in the junior high school because she's from Alabama. I was born in Brooklyn. She had to pick cotton, but she made me read. My pastor, going to Susan's point, would sit up in his study after service and underline books reading. I'm 4 or 5 years old. Because I'm a boy preacher, I'm sitting there underlining books I couldn't read, but it set a mentality that I grew up wanting to be a reader. And we've got to put that back in our community, that education is important, and that whether we do it charter, whether we do it public, whether we do it magnet, by any means necessary, we must regain our knowledge and thirst for education and reading and studying, and not being programmed by a media that is hostile to us, but by digging in the right books and the right, and not just read to be reading. I'm talking about reading the right stuff that will nourish us. That's on us.
Michael.
Think about the stats that we might have overlooked that Roland read in terms of relative states of literacy among black people. That shows you if the level of literacy was hyper-produced in, say, right after slavery, and then from slavery and Reconstruction, this denial, and then the remaking of America under Jim Crow. If black people had relatively higher rates of literacy and access then, more people going to college and graduating, It's because the nation's will was bent toward a permission and a tolerance toward black education before they quickly saw it as antithetical to their existence. Because white folk get caught in a paradox. First of all, they clown us for saying we ain't smart, and then when we get smart, they get mad, right? So you got to recognize. So this is when Miss Taylor said it's deliberate. Listen to what she's saying. There are deliberate attempts to keep us at lower levels, expelling our kids at 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, expelling them from schools, girls and boys, right? Indigenous people and African Americans, the leading figures among kids who get expelled. Then, when you put them in detention, that's a warehouse for jail. Jail becomes a feeder system into prison. You are literally marking your kids in the public schools that people want to defend, but as Roland is saying, if we can't find alternative structures and institutions of education, then what we're doing is ransoming our kids toward a future that we will never realize. So I say this, and look, I mean, here we are, my beloved young friend, Dr. Tina Kinchin, Dr. Tina Harris, who was at Princeton with me. I remember the meetings we would have, and we would talk these things over and hash them over. And I think about another person from Indianapolis, Tavis Smiley. Tavis put a lot of Negroes on television, put us up on game, made arguments about the nature of the distribution of our resources toward black prospering. Think about all those lessons when it comes to your kids. How can you turn to the same media that demonizes you to listen to what they say about your kids? Because so many of us imbibe unconsciously, I mean, that beautiful phrase that Ms. Taylor used, unconscious consumers. So now we're being bamboozled and hoodwinked to believe our kids are dumb, illiterate, untutored, incapable of learning when they lack opportunity. We say, oh, black kids just want to be ball players and stuff. And look, I teach white kids, they want to be Peyton Manning too. They want to do that, but here's the difference. They got options. They got alternatives. They got fallbacks. They got plan Bs. Negroes trying to ball ain't got no plan B, right? So now you want to be a basketball player, you want to be a football player, and when that don't come through, because it comes through for 3%, it comes through for a very small percent, then you crap out of luck.
We've got to showcase the black agents, the black executives, the black accountants, to say you can still be in the NBA, just not bouncing the ball.
Having said all that, you got to distinguish between schooling and education, right? Schooling is the institutional matrix that receives the impulse to learn. That's very important, right? But you don't want to trust a school with the education of your children. Education is knowledge transmitted with a purpose. And that ain't got to be in no institution. I know all the preachers up here shaking because Miss Taylor has said 2 times, you can stay at home and worship. I know they're going, Jiminy Christmas, my God, my tithes just went down. What is she talking about? Right? That ain't what she's saying. You know what she's saying. She's saying God can be best served by walking as a verb, not resting as a noun. Right? And so, right? And so even reprobate preachers like me, Jacqueline, you can see why I ain't got no church. You can clearly see, right? Because I would pass out condoms on the offering plate. But what's interesting to me, right? I give them to the preachers and deacons first, right? No. Of course. I ain't dogging us. Wait a minute. I'm not dogging us. Right? Don't try to clean it up. Okay. I ain't dogging us. I'm specifying. But what I'm saying, cause it ain't like the ladies ain't trying to holler at them. But what's interesting, it takes 2 to do in the tango. I'm on my point. Me too. So what I'm saying to you, is that if we could understand that we have the institutional infrastructure of a church to gather together intentional and purposeful black people to teach our kids Think about how many more Roland Martins and Susan Taylors and Al Sharptons we could produce. You don't know who you have in your kids. Stop beating them. Stop defeating them. Stop telling them they ain't nothing. Gather them together. And I'll end by saying this. My dream is not simply, as Miss Taylor said, that one day they'll pull their pants up and fly. My point is one day we'll accept the fact that they ain't got to pull their pants up and can still be great, like Jay-Z, like Puffy. So it's not right, as I often say, if you lift their dreams, their draws will follow. If you lift their dreams, their draws will follow. Then they can pull their pants up, put on their manhood and their womanhood, and learn to love each other and not hate each other, and then teach their children. I end by saying this. I have seen it so often when I go out in these communities. There is no lack of knowledge for black people. Every other Negro I meet got a book. Hey, can you read my book? Of course. And I met a book from a brother today. Right, tremendous young brother, Brother Shepherd, Shane Shepherd, right? Been in the prison, got out, got his book. Go check him out. Here's my point. Every other Negro I know got a nonprofit, got a book, got a business, and trying to get on. We don't lack desire. We don't lack intelligence. We lack opportunity, and let's give that opportunity to each other.
And a variety of folks did this report at the Samuel Du Bois Cook Center on Social Equity. And so what they lay out is that, and I've had these folks tweet me, and they've said that, oh, you've gotten it wrong when I've talked about focusing on banking black, buying black, also talking about black home ownership. And essentially what they conclude is that the only way to deal with the racial gap, the racial wealth gap in America, is for there to be one, either reparations, or for there to be a trust that is set up by the government that actually where those funds go to African Americans. And I go, okay, that's the conclusion of the 67-page report.
Right.
Until that happens.
Right.
And that's just, and that's fine.
That's right.
I read the report, went through all 67 pages. I'm like, yep, I agree. But let me know when they're gonna do that.
That's right.
In Young Van Zandt's old book. In the meantime,
Right.
we talk about the buck. We have to contend with, to understand America, you better understand money.
And no doubt.
And we lost 53% of our black wealth due to the home foreclosure crisis. It would take 2 more generations to reclaim that money.
That's right.
Home ownership among black folks right now is about 41%, down from a high of some 60%. And so we're still dealing with that. And so when we talk about the buck, moving forward, I say that the next 25 years, what do you say to this audience, those who may be watching via this live stream or watching later, to begin to confront what's happening with themselves financially?
Go online and look at me. Look at those images. You will see me in this jacket 400 times. It is custom made, it is fly, and I just keep wearing it because I am not giving that much, and it's made by a black woman. You know, we have to really wake up and see how we're spending our money. Every dime spent is a political decision made. Every single dime. I'm coming back to the sanctuary. I think, am I right? Our sanctuary is the only place of independence we have?
No longer.
No longer.
That's where I wanted to go. See, the problem is, and we met with about 60 black ministers today. One of the things that they have done to destabilize us is taking the black church. And many of us that complain about the black church don't go. And we'll sit home, talk about the black preachers, and watch Joel Osteen. What we must do is redeem and take back the black church and support it, and then fine-tune it, as Susan is saying, to go after these things. If every black church, if you got half the black churches in Indianapolis, this is what we started to deal with in Breadbasket when I was a kid. And we're starting to organize this National Action Network now. We want to take key cities, get 50 black churches, and say we all going to go bank at one bank.
Yes. Yes.
Every Monday morning,
Yes.
we all going to deposit in one black bank or one bank that we can do business. But here's the deal. In order for us to bank with you, you got to do business loans in our community. You got to deal with student loans. We're going to deal with mortgages because we will be putting millions in, but we want to be able to leverage that into something for our community. We talk about Jay-Z and them. I remember I brought Puffy to meet James Brown. James Brown said the problem is that y'all are in the show and not in show business. When he went and met with Nixon, he walked out with FCC giving him 3 radio stations. They go in and come out with colognes that's really not owned by them. Why aren't you in the business that you in? Isn't it interesting that we had 2 black entertainers that had owned radio stations, James Brown and Stevie Wonder, and that was 50 years ago. There's not a black entertainer that can exist without airplay, and none of them buy radio stations. So we beg for what we buy what we want and beg for what we need. And we've got to start having the discipline, as she said, of what we're doing with our dollar. Yes, the black church ought to do more, and we ought to support the black church, and rather than waiting on somebody coming through here telling us something, and then we want the black church to fight for us while we give the white evangelists our money.
If you think about in the history of America, I'm not saying the history of black politics, the history of all politics, I would argue that if you had a top 5, which includes presidents, governors, mayors, Mayor Jackson would be in that top 5 because Michael, what he did was, the documentary lays out, and I've been using him in speeches for 20 years. He called the banks in and said, y'all got no blacks on y'all board. They said, okay, we're not gonna put in there. They said there are no blacks who could do these jobs. He said, fine, to the city treasurer, come in, take the city money out their banks. Then they all of a sudden went out and found black people. But what he also did was, he then said, these black companies, because when he broke apart the big contracts, the smaller contracts, you become a prime contractor, because you can't bid on the prime contract unless you've been a prime before, and if you're only a sub, you can never be a prime. He then said, they need lines of credit. You know they have the city contract. Extend to them lines of credit because you know we give them a contract. They said no. He said, we're going to take our money out of your banks. He leveraged political power. So the reason Atlanta is the black economic mecca is because of Maynard Jackson. And just so you know, 1973 when he was elected, blacks were getting 0.0012% of every $100 spent in Atlanta, which meant that every $100 spent in Atlanta, black businesses got 12 cents. He changed that. And so again, the buck and the ballot forcing our political leaders to say, use your leverage to drive things economically for black folks. That's not a quota system, because you can say anybody with a city contract should be able to have a line of credit extended by a particular bank.
And that's why it's important, the cooperation between the ballot and the buck, because one of the things you do when you're a politician is you do what? You deliver critical resources to vulnerable populations in a time of crisis. That's what politicians do, right? I got a snowstorm. I got a flood. I got a tornado. So much of what gets people reelected, right? Sister Jane in Chicago got reelected just by shoveling snow. Delivering critical resources to vulnerable populations in a time of crisis, except a lot of black people don't demand of their political figures the kind of resources that other communities take for granted. Jews, Poles, Italians, Lithuanians, they say, look, you're gonna be responsible to us. Black people are the only people who do politics on credit, right? We do it on credit. Okay, if you promise the next time, then I'll do it. Whereas other people saying, right now, right? Gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual people, right now. Environmentalists, right now, right? Jewish brothers and sisters lobbying Israel, or in terms of understanding the expansion of opportunity for them economically, 2.3%, 3.5% of the population, and yet arguing for greater resources, right? Everybody but us. And those best black political figures, right, like a Reverend Al Sharpton, like a Jesse Jackson, like a Maynard Jackson, like Harold Washington, like Shirley Franklin, right, we can name the people who have done extraordinary work, have made sure that their people were taken care of, not outside the system, but from within it. And if I were to deliver, and Reverend Sharpton and I have talked about this, if I would deliver one critique of President Obama, is that he might have leveraged his presence there to open up that pipeline so that after he's gone, there was tremendous opportunity left for black people economically. Now, we know that he's going to come out as one of the top 10 presidents in history. There's no question about that. In terms of he inherited an economy that was bent out of shape, going to hell in a handbasket. And this orange apparition, this idiot, this unilluminated glob who continues to contend that he is now doing so, he's riding the train Obama put on the track to make it where it is, right? Then Obama bailed out the automobile industry. He literally saved Detroit in a fundamental fashion. And then he gave the TARP money to really meet the need of financial exigency for those who were messed up. And he did something controversial. People got mad when he bailed out the banks. But imagine the headlines of the first black president that under him the banks failed. Forget a second term. He wasn't going to get a second day in office. So he saved that. All I'm saying then, praising him for the enormity and the magnitude of what he did, a little attention to hooking up Negroes within the context of that is an extension of what the best politicians have done. So I'll end by saying this. The ballot and the buck have to go together because people who got the money dictate the policy, right? What do you see right now under this president? Billionaires are setting policy. Multimillionaires are setting policy of all colors, whether they are black or white. We got Ben Carson up in there, don't know a damn thing about housing. Don't know nothing about what he's doing, but he's setting policy based upon his feelings and not the reality. So I'll say this, the money is critical. Why? What Ms. Taylor said in terms of our own financial responsibility, what we're investing in, the stuff that we're buying stuff that won't take cognizance of us. When Jay-Z finally said, the reason we're not going to have that certain kind of wine we're going to take in, or that champagne, because they did the same thing. We know that they are drinking our champagne, but we don't care. We don't like those people doing it. So they withdrew that strategically and generated their own. But the reality is, if we're going to have an economic infrastructure, do you know how many millions and billions of dollars that are generated through our wealth? And yet we are not intentional and purposeful about where we direct those. If we do that, then we have the opportunity to then not only do it economically, but do it in the polls. Can I make this one final plea? Midterms are coming up. Midterms are just as important as a presidential election. Who your prosecutor is, who your governor is, who your attorney general is. Go vote like your life depended on it, because it does.
When we talk about the money as consumers, one of the things, and it hooks right into what has to happen in the midterms, we are financing the breakdown of our own community. We started an initiative in National Action Network this year looking at pension funds. They take pension funds.
Okay, hold on, stop right there. Who is a public worker? If you are a teacher, a firefighter, a police officer, a city, county, state, federal worker, stand up. Reverend, go ahead.
They take your pension funds, give it to money managers to invest. The money managers invested with developers that gentrify you out of your own neighborhood, and you paying for it. I went to a union. 82% of the union members are black. Not one money manager's invest their funds. I'm not talking about what you spend, I'm talking about what come out your check in pensions every week. You never ask them who is managing our funds. And we have people on Wall Street, Roland knows them, and Dyson knows them, you know Tracy Maitland and others, that can invest funds that don't have any union accounts, any municipal accounts, any state accounts. The city of Indianapolis should be using some blacks to invest that money. So grandma will not be financing you taking grandma's house and forcing her out with eminent domain, because you would have a money manager working with black developers that would be rebuilding our communities.
You are the largest investors in Wall Street. Y'all didn't get it. Pension funds, California Teachers Retirement Fund, New York Teachers Retirement Fund, Texas, every pension fund, Wall Street goes to you. So all y'all who stood up, you are actually financing big business in America, and they don't look like you. And if you as pension members, if you as the one, you have the pensions, if you turn around to Reverend Sharpton's point and say, no, y'all gonna start giving money to black hedge funds, to black money managers, they have no choice because it's your money.
It's your money.
And you don't even realize it. Susan Taylor, final comment.
Oh, these are phenomenal speakers, great minds. And then you're all going to go home, and in 3 days you're going to forget everything that was said. That's just how our minds work. You have brilliance right here, right in this city. And what you have to do is make sure those sanctuaries are open on Saturdays and Tuesday nights and Thursday nights and whenever they are empty, so that you come and you speak about the very things we're talking about tonight. What are the schools that are in the region of the church I go to, and how are those children doing? Let me be watchful of that. What's happening with gentrification? What about the monies that are ours that are being used to gentrify us out? None of this stuff is going to stick because we don't have a plan. We have to heal ourselves. We have to learn how to trust one another again. We have to learn how to love ourselves and one another again. And that means we have to come together. We just can't come together for the party or to hear, black people are natural orators. You can find great black speakers everywhere. We've got to come together strategically and regularly to talk about the very things we're talking about tonight and come out of those meetings with what, Roland? A plan.
There's a lot of critique to be made, and we should make it, but I believe I'm defensive about that institution, as we all are, because we wanted to achieve so much more than people have thought that it was capable of achieving. But Robert McAfee Brown, the old theologian, said the church is like Noah's Ark. If it wasn't for the storm on the outside, you couldn't stand the stink on the inside. Right? It's a lot of stink in the church, but it's a lot of storm outside. And that's why Ms. Taylor keeps referring to it. I like how she gave that alliteration of the B. She added that fourth B there. That's what black women do. Extend, improvise, and add on to. Because they will run stuff even if they ain't on program. Right? That's what they will do. So the building is critical. The church is critical. The genius you just heard in terms of that financial institution and fiduciary responsibility and the way in which it was broke down is a product of the black church. This man a product of the black church. I came about the black church. This woman deeply involved in black religion in a fundamental way. All of us owe our lives to spirit, but spirit makes religion behave right. We need something that transcends our sectarian binds. And I think that as people who love God, and whatever you call God, and whatever you refuse to call God, if we come together to understand that as a black people, we are the manifestation of an imagination that very few people could conjure. Howard Thurman, the great preacher, said, never reduce your lives to the event that is your immediate experience. This thing right here will not exhaust you. He said our slave foreparents saw something that they couldn't even begin to realize, but they knew we were coming. Yes. They felt in their bones that we were coming. If they could do that, what more can we do with our intelligence and our inspiration? That's why I love the church, the temple, the synagogue, whether you read the Bhagavad Gita, the Holy Quran, the Tao Te Ching, the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, or comic books, whatever it is that inspires you, allow that inspiration to translate into on-the-ground stuff. So going to these churches and seeing them used as the potential warehouse of our genius. Imagine if church members who are fund developers, church members, deacons who are part of the NBA, church members who are part of accountants, if they would teach the people in their local churches, can you imagine the transmission of knowledge across the board? I end by saying this, them churches got dough too. If the black church insists we ain't gonna put our money in a bank that won't develop our communities, that won't give us a loan when we need it, then we yank that money out of that bank and we go somewhere else. And stop listening to Paula White and Joel Osteen and people who feed you a diet of evangelical poison when the Negro on the corner could use that money and that tithe to make something out of the lives of the people that you care for. Stop worshiping right people and stop worshiping those who hate you and embrace the people who look like you. Black skin, black nose, black hair, black behind, black eyes, black brains, black souls. That's what we need.
We've had a great conversation. We've had a great dialogue. Now you must deal with accountability.
Right.
For 3 years, I hosted Reverend Sharpton's Measuring the Movement. And the whole point of that was about people make commitments. They said we're going to do this, 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 and then we will hold them accountable over the course of the year to see who did what, who lived up to what they said, and those who didn't. Because it's the one word we're most afraid of, is accountability. There are people in here who are members of fraternities and sororities. We mentioned the black church, but actually, the one institution that does not depend on money from anybody else are black fraternities and sororities. They fund themselves. That's 2 million plus members. The thing that we have to get to deal with is accountability.